right, good morning. Today, talking about meditation, I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to try to embellish the understanding of meditation with a narrative. Right, so take it for what for what you find it valuable. It's a story. But here's where we start. Right, we start with the experience of meditation and what that means in the embodiment of our practice, right? So we start by sitting. We start by maybe focusing on the breath, and with that comes this realization quite soon in the practice, a realization that things we thought were us, like the phenomena that we feel, the sounds that we hear, the thoughts and emotions that we feel, quite early on we recognize, although these are ours, right, there's a space in which they happen. And we aren't just the swoosh and swoop of emotions. We're beginning to notice that there's this sort of paradigm or this space in which things occur. Again, at first, there's a very strong sense of ownership and a very clearly identified observer. But we are now looking at these phenomena and noting them. So noting is a practice, a very traditional practice, where as something arises, you actually label it. Thought, emotion, sensation, sound, noise outside, dog, right? And as you note, the window of the noting becomes increasingly refined, becomes more and more granular. Right? So this is where my story starts to pick up, because I'm imagining kind of a science fiction story with a meditation infusion, where there is a school off in the galaxy somewhere teaching this refined noting practice. Now, why would that be an interesting story? Well, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just me that finds it kind of entertaining. But if we start with, so in his podcasts and books, Joseph Goldstein talks about the idea of notings per minute, right? That as you are observing and reaching or achieving certain levels of stability, the notes per minute increases. And maybe at first when we're starting, it might be, breath. And then a couple of seconds later, oh, my finger hurts. Oh, that was a thought about, am I going to get this done in time to get to work, right? 3, 4, maybe 5 a minute of really observed notings. But what Goldstein says is that as the practice stabilizes, there are more and more notes per minute. And then you get to a point where, 1 a second, 5 a second, the notes become really percolating. And we start to recognize that this moment here right now is an observed instance of a continually arising and sustaining and departing set of sensations. And that this moment here with this set of notings, again, that window becoming increasingly refined, that there's nothing inherently different about this moment than about the moment that immediately preceded it. Whether we recognize that moment as being like a blink of an eye previous, or a minute before, or 2 hours before when the alarm first went off, or 2 years ago, 20 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Those moments are inherently no different than this moment, that we are kind of a held together set of items and issues that have been noted. And that this moment and the past moments are no different from the moments that we will say are to come. Right? The idea of the future moment, the past moment, and the present moment, right? They merge in. That is a corollary to the idea of increasingly granular noting, is this recognition that things like past, present, future, self, these are also fleeting constructs that we grab onto at our peril, right? When we attach to these things, that is where we introduce the idea of dissatisfaction or desire and desired attachment and unhappiness and suffering. So this sort of galactic school of observers that are being trained. Now, there are two things that these observers are trained in. One is the increasingly small perception of the immediate phenomena, and the other is sort of the technological use, or the use of technology to see further and further into the universe. And the narrative premise of the story is that the two kind of combine, and they certainly combine in these students who are educated and trained in stability of mind, and also how to use increasingly powerful observing mechanisms. Okay, now this is where I need to work on the story a little bit, right? Because what I'm thinking of when I talk about observing is the experiment with light. We have two different slits that light can go through. And if you change the path of the light, one way it will come through as a particle, and the other way it will come through as a wave. Okay. Now there's a thought experiment on top of that by a physicist called Wheeler, John Wheeler, I can't remember. And the outcome of this thought experiment is that if you insert another filter on that two-slit experiment, what you actually demonstrate is that the measured light, whether it's a particle or a wave, actually changes at the source when it was emitted, which is in the past. So the current state of the light is impacts the past state of the light in this thought experiment. So what if, as we as humans extend our observational horizon further and further out, we are actually also changing the present? Every time, so the Hubble telescope or the James Webb telescope, every time we see something that is further away, meaning the light began earlier in history, further back in time, what we're actually doing is precipitating change through to the present. And maybe this is unnoticeable, or maybe it is unnoticeable but profound. Like maybe our reality is changing constantly because of these observed fields extending out, and with it changing our past further and further. So this is a profound responsibility, right? So the galactic school of the observer is to balance maybe competing observers. What if there's a observational node over here and one over there? I see, 10 billion years ago, you see 10 billion and one. I see 15 billion, you see 15 billion and one. Who is shaping the present? And at the end of the story, there ends up being a single alien at the end of time, a single observer. But that's one part of it. The second part then is the corollary of that, which is as the meditation becomes increasingly refined, and we get down to hundreds of notes per second, thousands, millions of notes per second, we start to reach the Planck constant. So the Planck is a very, very, very small number. I don't remember what it is, but it's very, very small. You could say it's the smallest size possible in the universe, right? It's the actual constructed pixel of the universe. And here's the kicker in the story. When a meditator, when an observer reaches the observation of the Planck constant, they turn into a singularity. They become a black hole. Boom. And if at the same time they are plugged into the observational paradigm of the furthest point back in space and time, then I don't know what happens then. They're already a singularity. So I like that as a story. I might continue to tell it. Perhaps it will be an oral story only, because the idea of trying to figure out how to write that down seems a bit intimidating. But you get the point, right? To get the idea of our meditation practice is one of increased stability leading to ever deeper awareness of the process extending into past and future, to the point where those words actually lose their meaning. And a further granularity of moment by moment awareness. And that sort of, we become this field of perception, this field of phenomena at our core. Now, don't be alarmed, because then we always have the option of actually picking up a persona and saying, I'm going to go order a cup of coffee at Starbucks. But we should never lose sight of the fact that the reality of it is this narrative that's being expressed here. So anyway, let me know what you think. If you have any questions, comments, always leave them in the channel down here, or drop me an email. And I'm always happy to chat specifically about questions. So thank you, and I will talk to you soon.